Hi, this is Chris,
This is Randall
and this is Arts and Entertainment with
with Chris and Randall.
Welcome to our show. One day we're going to it's getting smoother. Randall, do you think it's getting smoother, that intro? Yes? I hope so. Hey,
Yes, yes.
if you think that intro is getting smoother, please leave a comment in the comment section below. Though I hope to God you have something more interesting to say than that. Like, as I like to say now, like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you've got any comments on whatever we talk about, if we read it in the first 2 weeks, we'll try to follow up with you. We might try to follow up with you if it's after 2 weeks, but I want to make sure that if you're seeing this 5 years later and you wonder why we haven't commented, it's probably because we died or moved on to other things. But this weekend, I watched the Jerry Seinfeld comedy special. Did you see that, Randall?
No, I haven't
On
seen it yet.
Netflix. It's called 23 Hours to Kill. I thought it was pretty funny, and it made me realize that, right now is an awesome time if you have access to a streaming service or YouTube to listen to a comedy album or watch a stand-up videotape. Or I think comedy is just it's such a tonic. Don't you feel that, when you're having a hard time in life, that's when you most need a good laugh?
Yeah, I guess you have to find the right stand-up. People are like so sensitive nowadays about certain
Right, but I'm
material.
saying, but when you're not happy or when life is hard, do you find it relieving to hear a good joke, just to laugh? Don't you find laughter to be somewhat liberating in a hard time in life? No,
it's a lot. You know what? It's really
no joking matters for you, man.
No, it is. But you know what? It's probably better to watch stand-up completely alone, because if you're watching with somebody that is not liking a joke and
That's
you're
a good
laughing at the
point.
joke,
You're right.
have you ever had that experience?
Well, okay. Here's the deal. If I'm at a live stand-up show and I'm drunk and the people I'm with are drunk, then we're all on the same room. Especially if I'm in a live stand-up show and everyone in the audience is laughing, so you're just gonna laugh because you're a good little sheep. Or if you don't, the comic, and I'm that guy. Sebastian Mancuso. I was at the Comedy Store. He just looked dead at me and he said, "I bet you didn't think you were going to be at a comedy show tonight." And I was like, "Dude, you're just not fucking funny." Sorry, I know you guys sold out Madison Square Garden, but
were you sitting in the front row?
Middle enough, I guess, that he could see me not laughing at him. Going, where's my friend was like laughing? You're Sebastian. You're so fucking funny. No, you're not. Look, dude, I can say that. You're selling out Madison Square Garden 3 nights in a row. I'm just one person who didn't think you're funny. So yeah, I've definitely been that guy who just stood stone faced.
Yeah, some comics are very sensitive to that. Not all.
It's. I guess that's the point of crowd work too. A comic can do a lot more to win over a live audience than they can do on a taped show. It's very weird too, because I'm jumping. I apologize, folks, but there's a really funny Mark Maron comedy special called End of Times Fun on Netflix. And I actually I'm in the audience with my girlfriend. We're in the front row, the left side. So I remember watching it, laughing really, really hard and having a good time. And then I watched it on Netflix. It's really funny. I definitely recommend it. But yeah, it is definitely a different experience. And you're definitely more aware of the person in the room. Well, I saw it with the same person I saw it live, so it was no different experience for me. But it's weird when no one else is laughing besides you. Where at least when you go to a live show, even if the person you're with isn't laughing with you, there are other people. Though in fairness, most of the time I'm the guy going, "Is this really funny?" Wow, we're getting so far afield. Which was
well, it's just
so we all use a good laugh. We like stand up. Randall, growing up, who were your big stand-up comedy superheroes? Who were the ones that the young Randall would listen to get through the day?
Well, of course, Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy was.
Me too. I loved him. Oh my God, yeah. You would have been what? You would have been like a little kid he would have been what, 6 when he was on 81.
It was like
and
it was
then,
when I was in elementary school and Eddie Murphy hit. It was like it was huge. I
yeah.
mean, even
And
kids
I
love
was in
this
high
stuff.
school and in college. And in high school, in 81 is when he was on Saturday Night Live. And then I think 82 is when he put out Comedian or Delirious. And we would just quote it, like, boy, you look good in them jeans, or lemonade, that cool, refreshing drink. It was obviously a very nerdy thing to do. But we did say these were our superheroes, didn't we?
Well, Eddie Murphy, he practically defined modern stand-up comedy. I mean, it's like probably kids today probably don't even understand that. Like
he was very he was very funny. I mean, he was a very dangerous guy. He was one of the first comics to lean into the. Well, he wasn't one of the first. Richard Pryor is really. He comes out of Pryor. Pryor is really the first one, and he was a big hero. I'm 10 years older than you, so I guess Richard Pryor to me would have been what Eddie Murphy was to you. Meaning, I knew Richard Pryor through a lot of the softer stuff that he did when I was a kid. Like, he was in the Silver Streak. He'd do movies with Gene Wilder, or he would be on television and he would tell he had a variety hour, and it was funny, but in a softer way. And then I would listen to his albums, and his albums were explicit in race and sex and drugs and
comedy
wow.
Comedy
and
albums.
Eddie Murphy too. Eddie Murphy, his albums are much more out there than when he's the voice of Donkey on Shrek.
Well, comedy albums have been big business for years, right? Since the beginning. Well, I don't know, since the 50s
but
at least.
And they were for me growing up. So for me growing up, I really should have started with me. I'm sorry, man. I was trying to be polite, but because I'm 10 years older than you, it doesn't work because the chronology works with chronology. So like growing up for me, there were the HBO specials, but we just got HBO. But there wasn't a lot of comedy specials. There were a lot of comedy albums that were recordings of people doing concerts. So I would really dig Robert Klein, a very 70s comic, and then I get his album. Or I would dig David Brenner, another very 70s comic, and I get his album. And as a kid, man, I would just listen to the Pryor albums. And I think the one that really it was weird because growing up, those guys were all established already. But I remember when Steve Martin broke on Saturday Night Live, and I'm like, this guy the perfect comic for a young kid, because he wasn't really talking about sex and drugs, which I have to admit, as an 8-year-old, I did not have a lot of sex or drugs yet in my life. It wasn't I couldn't relate to that.
Yeah, his routine was very accessible for kids.
Right.
Yeah.
It was I like to get small, or he had a song about King Tut, and he talked about getting kittens and putting handcuffs on them, and what to do how to make $1 million without paying taxes. And then the IRS comes to your door, you say, I forgot. And stuff like that. He was very Steve Martin, and then almost 5 minutes after Steve Martin, Robin Williams from Mork and Mindy, who put out a comedy album, I think in 79. I cannot remember what it's called. I just remember it was something like Live at the Copacabana in New York. And Robin Williams and Steve Martin could not have been the more perfect two comics for children. Gary Marshall's son was the one who recommended that Gary Marshall cast Robin Williams as Mork. Anyway, yeah. So as a kid, I would have to say Robin Williams and Steve Martin were the perfect. Before Eddie Murphy came around, they were the big, perfect stand-up comics. They just killed me. Were you a fan of Robin Williams?
I remember watching because I think you're talking about Robin Williams' An Evening at the Met in 1986.
Oh, that was later down the line. I'm talking about his 1979 album at the Copacabana in New York.
Oh, okay.
But this is the Robin Williams that is more known for Mork and Mindy, and not the guy who did any movies. But 1979, he was a movie star Robin Williams. Yeah. 1987, that's a great special. He's movie star Robin Williams. But go on.
I might have this one wrong, but I think this one, I watched one with my mom. He had been on Mork and Mindy, and I watched it with my mom rented it or something, and he's super dirty. And
yeah.
he has this whole routine about being a penis. He acts out being a penis.
Oh yeah, no, that was true.
Oh, here's one: An Evening with Robin Williams in
Well,
1983.
which is the one that you were talking about that you saw that really kind of hit you?
The one that I was embarrassed by, but with my mom. It was probably An Evening with Robin Williams in '83. This is the
Yeah.
one, San
So
Francisco's Great American Music Hall.
did you I was gonna say, did you watch it on what was it, on HBO or something? Set us
No,
up.
we rented it. My mom, we just got a VCR, and like when I was a kid, we just got a VCR. My mom started renting stuff at the video store, and probably the clerk told her this was super hilarious, which it was in parts. And my mom would rent it because she rented it because it's Robin Williams, Mork, and
Yeah.
it was embarrassingly dirty.
Were you? Because I just said with my mom, like my mom was totally good with letting us watch, and she would enjoy watching dirty comedy. So was your mom the same way?
No. Well, your mom's Jewish.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, I mean, my mom's like British, good British woman. She's like more uptight about stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's like
she did not enjoy. She didn't. She did not enjoy the Robin Williams special.
No, she didn't like it at all.
No.
It was way too dirty for her. I think we watched it all, hoping it would get better, but it never got better. It just got worse and worse. We might have turned it off when he started pretending to be a penis.
I will definitely say that. Well, actually, you know what? You met Robin Williams.
Sort of, yes.
Tell us about that. What, you met one of your heroes?
Well, about a year or two before he died, he has a friend that kind of is in the LA improv scene, stand-up scene. What's his name? God. Anyway, it's a friend of Robin Williams. He's an old Rick Overton. And Rick Overton, he hangs out in the theaters around LA. The IO West used to hang out at before it closed, and IO West and UCB on Sunset, and well, not on Sunset, on Franklin. And
right. So
anyway, Robin Williams, he did a surprise improv show at, well, I guess one of them, the iOS one was like planned. He did an improv show at the iOS, and this is a year or two before he died. And he did one at the iOS, and he did one at the UCB Franklin. Yeah. And the UCB Franklin was actually, I guess, but maybe it was a couple of years even before. It was like maybe 4 years before he died. Yeah. And the house was packed, man. It was packed. Everybody came out to see him. The iOS show, I took his picture, I was the iOS photographer at the time. So I took his picture, and he did improv. He did improv both shows. So, most people never got to see him do improv. He was kind of like a legendary improviser back in the day.
Oh, yeah. I know people who did improv with him. I had an improv teacher who started out with him, Cynthia Seghetti, and she would tell all sorts of stories about Robin and how great an improviser he was.
Well, it was fun watching him.
Did you talk to him at all?
You know what?
Did you speak to Robin, or did you have any?
No. He was a very nice guy, though. He was a very nice guy. He seemed like he was fine with hanging out for a little bit, but it's like,
he was a nice guy.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very short, small guy, and he was shy. You could tell he was a shy guy.
Yeah,
and it didn't seem like he was the kind of guy you might think, but he didn't seem like backstage. He wasn't the kind of guy that wanted to be the center of attention all the time.
Yeah.
Like he seemed like the kind of guy that would just be shy and be a wallflower.
So he didn't really seem like the guy that you had grown up laughing to. I mean,
well, he wasn't.
I mean, like, I guess on stage,
he wasn't the guy on stage.
Improv, he is like when you saw him doing improv live on stage with these people. Was that like watching the Robin Williams that you grew up with, your hero?
Yes. Well, he on stage.
And then as soon as he gets off the stage, it just the magic.
Yeah, he gets off stage and he has nothing to say.
Well, is it? I mean, is it like the Hulk where he just goes back to being Bruce Banner or something?
Yes, it was like that.
He's larger than life on stage, and then.
Well,
but he's a nice guy.
The funny thing about Robin Williams on stage is, I think he was a performer. Like you could see it in his improv shows. He was a performer that very much was in tune with the audience. He knew what the audience wanted. When he was doing, because I've seen other celebrities do improv, right?
Yeah.
And
I have too. You're right. It's normally disastrous. I mean, it's just. I've seen an Academy Award-winning actress and one of the great contemporary alternative stand-up comics, who I didn't even realize is not even on our list. What is his name? From Mr. Show.
Bob Odenkirk?
No, the other one.
Oh.
He's on Arrested Development.
Right. I can't remember his name.
He's a very funny comic, and everyone else is they're shouting his name right now. But anyway, I saw him and Hilary Swank both at the Groundlings do improv, and Hilary Swank won an Academy Award for Best Actress. So
David Cross,
thank you so much. And neither, I mean, they're both very talented people, but regardless of their talent, they're just not very good improvisers. But Robin Williams, on the other hand,
I don't think he was that great of an improviser, but
no, you didn't think he was a genius?
Well, every time I saw him do improv, it wasn't like he had been rehearsing for weeks. He just got up, to do improv after a 10-year hiatus.
So it was more than
rusty. He was rusty. He didn't know the people he was improvising with, but in spite of all that, he like I was trying to say, he was in tune with the audience. He knew what the audience wanted, So some celebrities, another thing. Some celebrities are afraid. They'll hang back. They'll let they'll try to come up with something good. They don't want to fall on their face in front of the audience. Yeah. Robin Williams was, he was at the end of his life. He had a long career. He had done a lot of improv, so he was completely fearless on stage. Well,
he was definitely in his prime as a performer. That was so cool. I did meet the other hero, Steve Martin, and it was nowhere nearly as cool a story as yours. So I'm going to tell it very, very briefly, because and it's sad. 'Cause I love Robin Williams. I think I loved Steve Martin just a little more. And how you know that, Chris? Well, I actually bought his book, Cool Shoes, which was not very good. But I read it, and I didn't understand it. But I still love Steve Martin so much. I saw all of his movies. And so in the early 90s, I'm living in New York City. Now, New York City, I'm living in Manhattan in an area that doesn't have a lot of gyms. So there's this new gym called the Equinox. I spend more money than I've ever spent in my life to join this gym. Eventually, I won't be able to afford it, but it was like I had just a little extra money on me, and I wanted to be a good-looking young man. So I was like, fuck, I'm going to join this gym. And so I would always go at the odd hours when no one would be there because it was just packed. So I'm there one day, and what do you call there's like 3 machines, and they're all next to each other. They're all like for upper body, like the lateral.
Lat pull down, maybe?
Lat pull down. Yeah, like lat pull down, all the different lat pull down machines.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've been in a gym that had those machines. So that's why I don't remember it. But it's just me. I'm doing my reps. And there's one other person there, I realize, staring at me who is trying to work in at the same time. But he's got a different, at that time, I would just use all the machines one at a time, and I wouldn't even do I didn't know what I was doing, so I just could spend forever.
So you're like, hey, out. Mr. Martin, good to meet you. I got 15 more minutes.
Fuck you for stepping on my. Fuck you for doing that. Fuck you. All right. So my point is, yeah, it is Steve Martin, and Steve Martin in real life is actually taller than Steve Martin in the movie. Steve Martin's face is bigger. Steve Martin would have been a giant stage actor in the 19th century. And I mean giant in both height, even though he's only 6 feet tall, and in presence. So, like, it wasn't like meeting somebody and thinking, oh, that kind of is like that. But no, it's fucking Steve Martin. And Steve Martin is looking at me, and he's looking at me in the way that anybody would look at you in the gym when they're like, dude, like, hurry that shit up. And I'm like, I'm feeling two things at the same time. One is, oh my God, I can't believe it's Steve Martin. And the other part of me is like, I have to concentrate on what I'm doing or I'm going to break my hands, you know? And I do need to do my reps in a certain amount of times. But I remember my trainer said, you have to pull these things down very slowly to get the maximum benefit. So I'm like, you know what, dude? You're no one. You know, you're just a normal person. You're no different than me. You're no better than me. I'm just going to ignore you. So as I'm pulling it down, I'm looking at ignoring him. And I'm just going to look at my chest. And then I realize, oh, yeah, I'm wearing a Three Amigos t-shirt. And for those of you who have no idea what I'm referencing, that is a movie with Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and Martin Short. So, yeah. And that's the only experience I ever had with Steve Martin.
You didn't even talk to him?
No. Oh, hell no. And he didn't speak to me. No smiling. I don't know if he was mad at me for taking so long. Now I realize maybe he was just mad at me for not mentioning the fact that I had a Three Amigos t-shirt, and he was waiting for me to say something. Probably he was waiting for me to say something.
Maybe he thought you were wearing it ironically. You know,
no, it was 1991, so the movie was about 6 years old. You know, he probably was wondering why I didn't say anything about the fact that his face was on my chest. Wow, I don't remember what the show was supposed to be about, but now it's taken on a whole other dark turn.
Hey, that reminds me of a story, a brief story. I went to a David Lynch book signing.
Yeah.
And I was in line, you know, I went up to him and I got to say a few things. I told him what I always want to tell him is I love the movie Dune. Yeah. And he looked at me like I just thrown cold water in his face. Like he didn't know, he couldn't understand what I was saying to him. Because I think he, you know, he's completely disowned that movie. You know, it's a great movie, but it was huge in Japan. Okay. That's a little joke there always, but it's true.
No, I hear you. I once went up to I'm a big fan of Elvis Costello and the Attractions, and I went up to I met the drummer after a show where they played like every freaking song in the entire Elvis Costello songbook, and I told him how awesome it was, and then I thought it was even cooler that they played a song that didn't feature that drummer because it was the one that he did at the Attractions, and he just looked at me and he was like, "Yeah, that's a sore point," and without really saying, "Dude, conversation's over," it was very clear. Conversation was over. So yeah, folks. And I did meet Dave Chappelle very briefly. He was roommates with a friend of mine. He was a very sweet guy, and I have absolutely nothing to say about Dave Chappelle because he was like a sweet and nice person. It brings us into, I guess, what can you watch right now? And you can certainly, if you like Dave Chappelle, there's no shortage of Dave Chappelle specials available on Amazon and YouTube, and I'm even assuming Netflix. There's even the Mark Twain special, which features a number of other comics.
Can I just say about Dave Chappelle?
Did you watch the special?
Not the Mark Twain one, but I just want to say about Dave Chappelle. I recommend it. I just want to say about Dave Chappelle, that's the perfect thing to watch completely alone with all the windows closed so nobody knows you're watching it. because you never know how somebody's going to take Dave Chappelle, right? I mean, there's some controversial stuff.
Basically say that Dave Chappelle is like watching animal porn. Is that what you're saying?
It's
something that you don't want other people to know. That's your deal, man.
I'm saying that Dave Chappelle's stand-up is going to be banned by the government eventually, and you don't want to be on a list. So watch it in secret.
Well, I mean, being banned—that's always what made comics. I mean. Carlin had the 7 words you can't say on TV, and that's always one of those things that comics are. But it's
Carlin's another one.
I haven't seen everything, but I did see on the special. There's like Sarah Silverman, Neil Brennan. Is Chris Rock on it? I think Chris Rock was on it as well. But if you just want to watch a lot, actually, it is on Netflix, and just. I'm going to say this. So if you want to see Aziz Ansari, Neil Brennan, Sarah Silverman, Jon Stewart. If you want to see them do stand-up. Notice I didn't say Bradley Cooper because he's not very funny. Yeah, besides Dave Chappelle, there's Chris Rock. There are so many. I've actually been to a couple of the live tapings of the Netflix shows, and Netflix has really been putting a lot of time and money into doing these shows. I just saw, as I said earlier, Jerry Seinfeld's, what was it called, 23 Hours to Kill. It just came out. That was a nice show. It's just about an hour long. Ronnie Chang, I thought was very funny. I mean, yeah, there are other channels you can watch. I definitely, I really did like that there are so many that they taped in the last year, because I guess, you ever feel with comedy that you want to see the most recent shows?
Yeah. I mean,
sometimes comedy really dates itself, right?
You know, have you ever listened to like some of those old comedy albums, like especially oh God, what is it? Maze. What's that comedy team? It was a man and a woman.
Elaine May and May Hodge, great film director.
Elaine May
and Mike Nichols.
Yeah, have you ever listened to those?
Absolutely, I have.
Are they funny? I feel like I'm like so far gone from that era. I barely understand it.
They're funny. Nichols and May is really funny.
Nichols and May. I mean, I always heard for years how good it was.
And I'd put it. It's funny, but it's dated. I would say that Bob Newhart, who's from that same era, is also funny, but not all of his material is as dated. Red Fox, who's from that era.
You know, Red Fox supposedly was one of
very
in the world
funny,
of comedy album.
And never dated.
He's very vulgar, but in the world of in the world of comedy albums, his albums sold like crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I tried to listen to some of the Red Fox, and he seems kind of dated to me too. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what it was.
Well, all of it's a product of its time. Though I would absolutely recommend anybody who wants to listen to good 1960s comedy, check out Nichols and May, Red Fox, Bob Newhart, even the more straightforward George Carlin of the 60s versus the hippie Carlin of the 70s, the one who does a really funny bit on the difference between baseball and football.
You know, Carlin.
Did you hear that one?
Yes.
It's great. It's genius. It's just genius.
Well, Carlin is like, I think his style never really, I think Eddie Murphy like might have changed stand-up in the respect that, in the sense that after Eddie Murphy's huge success in the 80s with stand-up became like shorter and punchier and more punchline-y and, you know, less storytelling, you know, and so like George Carlin, I think, you know, he's an old guy, right? So he's not really like that.
Well, Carlin happens in two acts. There's George Carlin, clean-shaven, very funny, witty, clever guy of the 60s. And then there's a long-haired, scruffy, bearded George Carlin, anti-establishment guy of the 70s, who is, you know, much more out there and much more. They're both very clever men, and their material isn't that different from each other. But just like imagine if Jerry Seinfeld decided tomorrow morning he would never wear a suit again, and he would just wear like Resist T-shirts and a bandana, and he would just do a whole thing on like, you know, what's wrong with Wall Street? You know, who are these investment bankers? You know, why isn't there health care? You know,
well, true, but
Bernie Sanders all the time.
True, but I just feel like some of the old style of comedy was very long-winded, you know, and Carlin, I think, is
maybe
a great
that's
example
just your
of that.
age, you know.
Well, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that
it doesn't.
There's the material.
Like you're saying, Eddie Murphy was much tighter. Yeah,
is very tight. Yeah. I mean, Eddie Murphy's stand-up specials were so tight. I mean, kids would quote him on the playground. You know, I mean, because
that's true, and it was much easier to quote Eddie Murphy growing up than any of the other comics.
Yeah, did any kids quote Nichols and May on the playground? I don't think.
Well, that's my mom's era, so yes, and your mom's era too. But
I don't think they did though.
But I don't think I quoted Steve Martin. Oh, I quoted Steve Martin a little bit.
You may have. He was fairly tight. Some of his material.
Steve Martin and Robin Williams were gentle, and they were appealed to the pre-teenage me. Whereas like teen me thought Eddie Murphy was dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eddie Murphy, he also
that's a fire.
He also brought that attitude to stand up. He acted like a movie star. He dressed in a leather suit.
Yeah.
Raw. I mean, he was he was a rock star. He was the first rock star comic. And
he was very much I agree. And even in the movies, even though we don't really talk about the movies too much, he brought that persona into almost everything he played in the 80s. Whether it's 48 Hours or Beverly Hills Cop, until you get to the late 80s with Coming to America, he really is he's just that Eddie Murphy from the stand-up. He's just that badass.
Maybe this was coming out left field, but I think the only other stand-up I can think of that brought that kind of energy was Eddie Izzard.
Yeah, because Eddie Izzard, very much so. I agree.
Because Eddie,
specials. Dress to Kill is, I think, one of them on the list. And, if you can find any Eddie Izzard comedy special, I think you're going to find it to be,
I've seen Eddie Izzard live,
I would definitely say, like Eddie Murphy. Oh, really? What was that like?
Well, I've seen Eddie Izzard live, recently, and he has gotten much more like an old school comic where he's more long-winded, and he's more storytelling, and he even does pictures now. He does slides, like a slideshow and things. He talks about his childhood. He gets autobiographical. So I mean, he's really broadened his performance, But his early stand-up,
is it better now or just different?
Well, I mean, it's different. I mean, it's different. I mean, it's hard to well, his like if Eddie Izzard, if early Eddie Izzard didn't exist, then old Eddie Izzard would be amazing, right? But because old Eddie Izzard exists, it's like, and you compare it. Old Eddie Izzard is incomparable. Old Eddie Izzard is some of the greatest stand-up ever. I mean,
well, there are very few stand-ups, I would argue, who maintain that edge all throughout their career. I can only think of a handful. I do think that Carlin never lost his edge. I think Carlin, if you watch even his latter comedy specials, he always knew how to tell a good joke. And I think he always cut well. I actually think Jerry Seinfeld is still pretty tight, even at 65. I mean, if you watch the comedy special, he opens up with one of his oldest jokes ever about how people are always trying to go from one place to another and they're never there. It's like he's been telling that for 30, 40 years. But the way he tells it now is still funny and fresh. And it's funny and fresh, and it's an old joke. So, there's some people, even Jay Leno, I think Jay Leno is still really good. If you ever listen to Rodney Dangerfield or Don Rickles when they were on the talk shows at the end of their life, they were still, the timing, they just, I think some comics, what happens is they just walk away and they take up acting and they become more serious. And when they come back, they're just, I don't know, maybe the persona is just not there anymore or something. They didn't evolve, But I definitely think it's a good question. I would ask you is why is Jerry Seinfeld still? Do you like Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah, of course. His
so why is he still funny today? You sound like a stand-up comic. They always do a bit on their hair. But why is Jerry Seinfeld still funny today? Why is that humor? I would argue it hasn't aged because I don't think he was ever very topical. He rarely talked about presidents. He rarely talked about what was going on outside of the regular day-to-day life. He was much more about, talking about human behavior, which hasn't changed much in all of history. What do you think?
Yeah, well, he was well, people call him the master of observational American style humor, and
that comes out of Carlin.
Well, Seinfeld was really good at, and you tell me because you've seen his latest special. He was always really good at being very tight, right? Having like a very tight delivery and punchline crafted together, and So, I mean, in that respect, he's very, very modern,
Yeah.
And he's not like a Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle is like very storytelling-y, with his
Well, it's
delivery.
weird because he does do that, but you really like if you watch the special, he did a neat thing where he does about a half hour about you, the audience, and then he does a half hour about himself. So it's not all, hey, this is what it's all like. He's like, I'm 65. Here's what I do now. And then in the middle of this, he does this whole bit on the origin of the Pop-Tart. And he basically compares, he does a bit that might as well have been straight up either Carlin, or even for that matter, it might have even been Bob Newhart, where he imagines what it was like when they invented the Pop-Tart at Battle Creek, Michigan at Kellogg's. And he talks about what it was like growing up, which reminded me of Billy Crystal. Then he does a whole thing with Moses, and instead of the 10 Commandments, it's the Pop-Tarts. So it is actually the kind of stuff we never think about when we think about Jerry Seinfeld, which is not just observational, but exaggeration, imagination, all sorts. And he uses his body fluidly. He's in great shape. Absolutely. He is in good shape, and he throws his arms, marches. He uses a suit, and he uses the suit for full comic effect because the suit is kind of tight on him, and it makes him stiff in a way. And, yeah, his body is constantly fluid. I saw Mark Maron, great show, but he never left his seat. He was sitting down most of the time. He does use his body a little bit. He does get up a little bit. But Maron is much more planted.
Yeah, Mark Maron.
Seinfeld's not a planted comic. He's like, which is weird because you would think that he's planted because you're so used to thinking of the ending of every episode of Seinfeld.
Well,
that's just done for TV.
Well, yeah, on TV, they used to tell comics if you're on TV when they're shooting you because of the camera, they'd tell you to plant your feet. You can't move. You can't walk around. It's like a shooting thing. It's like it's technically difficult to follow you around. But now with lighter cameras, I think it's not a problem. But yeah, in the olden
days, they can just follow you wherever you go.
In the olden days, comics had to stay right in that.
Which is great if you're a deadpan comic. It's like if you watch Stephen Wright, it's a joy to watch Stephen Wright.
I just wanted to bring up Stephen Wright. He's one of the greatest underappreciated comics. Yeah. I don't know why.
Absolutely.
He I don't know. He's been doing stand-up for years and years, right? I saw his HBO special when I was a kid. I don't know why he's not huge. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't want it, but he's possibly the funniest stand-up of all time. I don't know. What do you think? He's up there.
Well, he's very funny in a particular way, and I think it's fun. I'm very lucky. My girlfriend is a stand-up comic. So even when I was watching Seinfeld, I'm like, why is this funny? Why is this working? Or when I saw Maron, the same thing. It's like, why is this funny? Why is this working? Because, I'm not a stand-up comic. So for me, it's like eating a really good cake. You're like, why does this taste so good? But when you talk to a stand-up comic, it's like talking to a baker. It's like, well, I think, Chris, what you're reacting to is the flavor of cinnamon or how good butter tastes in vanilla, or the vanilla syrup or the layering of chocolate. Like there's a process and a structure. So I think that some comics are very funny because they're very dry. Some comics are very funny because they're very emotional. I think it's possible for someone like myself to love Stephen Wright, who is so deadpan and surreal, right? That great joke about he's got a job interview and he said, let me ask you a question. If you're traveling at the speed of light, how do you know if you've got your headlights on? Faster than the speed of light, right? Like, I'm not great for that. He was conceptual, right? So I love conceptual comedy, but like Dave Chappelle, I'm going to pick on him, or Chris Rock. They're not conceptual. We don't think of them as conceptual comics. They might use conceptual work, but they're normally talking about what life is like today. And it's not very conceptual, but I like both. Steve Martin was never a comic to talk about what life was like in the here and now. He's crazy conceptual. I find him funny, but he's zany,
What about Carrot Top?
I hate Carrot Top. I don't like Carrot Top. If you like Carrot Top and you're watching the show and you tell me that I'm being mean about him, then I'll say, who probably like Gallagher, and I don't like Gallagher either. Prop comedy is hard.
No, I was a kid when I was a kid. Gallagher was huge. I mean, everybody was he's basically huge on VHS. Everybody was renting his cassettes, his tapes on VHS and watching them at home, and people loved him. People loved him. They loved it.
Crush that watermelon.
Yeah, when he broke the watermelon, people loved going to the show and getting watermelon juice spilled on them, and it was a whole thing,
I mean, I feel bad because I know that I'm a comedy snob, and I know the downside of being a comedy snob is like I've never seen Larry the Cable Guy. I've never seen Jeff Foxworthy. There's a lot of like if you've
never
puppets,
you've never seen one Jeff Foxworthy?
No puppets, no ventriloquists for me.
Jeff Foxworthy's first HBO special, where before he was big, the one that made him big, it's really good. It's really good. That's the one where he talks about you might be a redneck if and all that.
I'm terrible that way. I'm definitely, and I have a harder time with young comics. Like the youngest comic that I really dig is John Mulaney, who I believe is in his mid to late 30s and tells jokes for people in their 50s. He's great. I love him. But I've been going to stand-up shows, as recently as when I was in New York this past Christmas. And I'm like, I don't think this is funny. And maybe it's age too, because I think what young stand-ups find funny are things like, hey, I remember the first time I got high or drunk, or, what it's like to try to have JoJo. Like their comedy, I think, is often told from the perspective of the comic where they are in their life. So it's no accident that the middle-aged comics are much more relatable to me than a young comic. I don't want to hear about what it's like to be in your 20s or 30s or even I don't want to know, because to me, all I'm dealing with right now is middle age. So all I want to do is listen to comics who are either dealing with middle age or who are dead now, and I can watch clips of them when they were middle aged talking about being middle aged. You ever feel that way? Like you just want the comics that can speak to your own experience?
My experience is not funny.
Or are you more broad-minded? Are you? But I mean, I don't mean to be an asshole because, like, obviously.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because one of the great.
Like, aren't you going to listen to so and so? She's brilliant. She's from Nairobi, Kenya. She grew up with no arms. She's,
we just talked about
multiracial Kenyan, or whatever, and she's a communist. They're like, no, I don't, because unless she's truly, truly funny, most of what she's talking about, I can't relate to. So
I grew up watching a lot of stand-up.
For that.
Well, we both must have grown up watching a lot of stand-up because we were growing up during the 80s comedy boom, right? Yeah. And we saw a lot of that stuff. It was on TV and in the clubs. And there were a lot of comics that nobody's ever heard of. A lot of people did comedy. So I'm sure you saw comics that like were like that, there was a lot of funny stuff going on. I mean, people were I saw a lot of comics who had a completely different life experience. I mean, look at Eddie Izzard, right? His early stand-ups were really great. I mean, he talks about a completely different experience than what you or I would have had.
I guess so. And if a comic can really find the universality, I'll connect. You're absolutely right. I love Trevor Noah's stand-up is hysterical.
I don't know. I don't really
with Trevor Noah.
I don't really look at these comics. I don't look at any of these comics. I rarely look at people in the media and think, oh yeah, they're just like me. I don't know. Maybe other people do, but I never really.
Well, I think it's also because no one's like you.
That could be, but
no, but
I never really have that impression.
Maybe there really aren't people like you in the media.
Maybe, but I felt a connection to Kurt Cobain a long time ago. Yeah. I remember reading Catcher in the Rye and thinking that Holden Caulfield was like one of the only characters I actually could connect with and relate to, like, which is, something I heard other people did with other books. And
you're raising a really good point, which is in comedy, I guess you're right. I don't mind if the comic is different than me. There's a lot of comics I like, or women comics, or who are not Jewish. Well, are there any non-Jewish comics that I like? Well, yeah, Steve Martin's a non-Jewish comic. So yes, you Gentiles can be funny at times, and God knows everyone who is not Caucasian has the opportunity to be much funnier about Caucasians and Caucasians. So yes, I like everybody who can be funny. I'm just saying that as I like with music, it's just you're going to have to try a lot harder to find where you and I have a common thread in order for me to laugh at you. And if you're coming from a world that I can't relate to, that doesn't mean you're not funny. It just means I can't relate to it. And I definitely will say, more than anything, there's probably comics who are just so much older I can't relate to, and they're so much younger I can't relate to, or whatever it is that is their point of view, I just can't relate to, or I find offensive, or I don't find offensive, but I just find dull. You know, like Sebastian Mancuso, I'm picking on you because you're an asshole to me. I just don't think you're funny. I think you're funny, but you're not fucking brilliant. So there's probably some comic out in the world that you don't get. Is there a comic out in the world you don't get?
That I don't get at all.
Yeah, like I don't know why people like that comic.
Well, usually I can look at people's act and I sort of get what makes them tick. When I was younger, I would have trouble, but you know, I've seen now I kind of get it. Even if I don't like the act, I understand that there's an audience, you know. I'm trying to think now. Well, no, I don't know. I sort of get most of these acts.
No.
Can I just give a shout out to some comics I like? Like, well, I'll just give a shout out to one last comic. Jim
like, are you going to put out a shout out to our friend Jim Gaffigan? Yeah, he's awesome.
It's not really a shout out; it's more like a recommendation. Okay, so Jim Gaffigan.
I was so worried because I got to say right now. First off, Kelly Spillman, greatest comic, and it's my girlfriend, but even she wasn't greatest comic alive today.
Okay, so Chris wants to make a recommendation to watch his girlfriend. Where can people watch her comedy?
When she's on a streaming show or on YouTube. But
okay, so you gotta wait. You gotta wait then. Okay.
No, I think you Google her and you'll probably
Google her. You can find stuff. All right, Kelly Spillman. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, if you want to watch something with your family, you know, the funniest clean comic I think is Jim Gaffigan, and I know you don't even like him. I think we talked about him earlier, but
no, I don't dislike him. I'm not. No, I think I don't. I hear he's great. He's probably funny, and I'd add to that the funniest clean comic I like is John Mulaney.
Yeah, John Mulaney, he comes up a lot. So those two guys are like probably
and you can
funniest.
watch them with your family. Yeah.
Right, they're the funniest clean comics you could watch. Like if you want to sit down and watch stuff with your kids.
Yeah.
That's probably those two. Should we end this show? Because it's like
we should end this show. All right. Well, first off, before we end the show, what did you guys think? Is there a comic that you think we were wrong about, or is there a comic we didn't mention, or is there a comic or a comedy special you want to recommend? No, we didn't do comedy movies. We didn't do sitcoms. We didn't do any other kind of comedy. I promise you, we will cover all of those things in good time, as long as we're still alive. But right now it's just about comedy specials, not even comedy albums. I do want to give a shout out if you want a raunchy thing on YouTube. You can listen to Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip. No watching it. It was a documentary, but you can listen to it. It's freaking genius. Please like and subscribe. I'm Chris Corbell.
Randall Mills.
Thank you for watching. Bye.